probably use Haiku, which is their lowest model, and get just as good a result. So we're finding for the things that we use AI for, and I think for enterprises, 95% of the things they use AI for, you could use an open source model, like Llama, like Gemma, like Quinn out of Alibaba in China, like Kimi 3. Those open source self-hosted models.
Welcome back to the High Ticket AI Systems Podcast. Everyone, please welcome the one and only Mr. Matt Hixson. Matt, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing today?
Thanks, Jordan. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now, I have some exciting things to discuss in this podcast with you, but before we dive into the nitty gritty, can you give the audience some context as to what the company does and who you guys serve best?
Sure. Tellagence is a context layer for AI. We've been around for 15 years and have had a lot of ups and downs and twists and turns, I guess, along the way. Should have died a few times probably along the way. We've been doing AI for 15 years before it was cool. And now that it's cool, we do a pre-processing layer to AI to make it accurate and affordable. So
You've been doing AI for 15 years. What the hell are you talking about? AI just came out like 3 years ago.
yeah, in theory, it's been in labs for a long time. And AI has taken a lot of iterations, right? It's machine learning, it's NLP, it's people think of it as a chatbot today, but there's a lot of pieces to AI that have existed in labs for a long, long time. So
For sure. How do you guys make it? So you said pre-processing and affordability. How? What do you mean?
well, so if you read the news at all, and it's interesting, depending on who your listener is, a lot of people may have touched ChatGPT or seen Gemini in their email or something like that. But from a business perspective, all these businesses are trying to figure out, how do I use AI? I've heard all these promising things about it. So what do I do with it? How do I use it? And the people that are using it a lot today are finding it's really expensive. And the real challenge is your cost per correct answer, right? So AI sounds really confident. It's probably one of the most confident liars you'll ever meet, even when it's wrong. It will tell you what it wants you want to hear. It's right a lot of the times. It's gotten a lot better for sure, but it's not perfect. And so in AI, they've invented things after you stick it to an LLM, like things called a RAG or a loop or all these different things to try to improve the accuracy of an AI. And the reality is that if you just do some pre-processing before you actually ever feed it something to an AI, we've got research that proves it's dramatically more accurate. And actually that the cost, which is the token cost, that's what's eating people alive today, we can reduce the token cost by over 50%. And so it's just a part that people aren't thinking about yet.
That is amazing, reducing costs, right? But when you say pre-processing, can you give us an example of what that would look like?
Yeah, so our first area of focus is with marketing organizations. We've worked with marketers for the last 15 years. We feel like we're experts in that space. We're not always going to be experts in every space, but social marketing is one we're very strong in. And so when you think about trying to understand your audience on social, trying to understand consumer intent on social, and you go pull, 1 million records of people talking about your product or your topic. What you do today is you have a listening platform that takes those and gives you some graphs and charts and sorts them and says, here's what you should know. Well, it doesn't tell you here's what you should know. It goes, here's the counting and sorting over time. And then you typically have an analyst who goes, all right, well, what do I do with that? How do I understand that? What story do I make out of this for the business? So what we do is that we can take those million records, we chop them up into similar type conversations. We're processing the text itself. And then we segment those little conversations into groups that matter, very similar. So for example, and then out of those come some insights. You can get really accurate sentiment, really accurate categorization. But what I mean by that is that we're chopping those conversations up before we ever involve an AI. The AI is only done to summarize the content after we've chopped it up. And then the AI is done to say, all right, what's the sentiment of this post given this summary? And so we spend 200 tokens to get an extremely accurate answer, not 1 million tokens. So for example, if I asked you the question, she's coming for blood, is that positive or negative?
It really depends,
Right. So in that context, that came from work we were doing with YouTube. And they were looking at artist videos. And that's from an Olivia Rodrigo video where her last album was about blood and vampires and all these things. And so for her fans, that was very positive. but you've got to know the context. So that pre-processing of understanding that conversation before you ever feed it to an AI is where we get that reaction, that accuracy.
Now, when we have segmented the data on behalf of marketers, why what happens next? How can we take that data and actually get results from it?
Yeah. So what marketers are trying to do is a couple different things, right? Ultimately, what marketers are trying to do is either understand a consumer's conversation about your brand or your product, or understand their mindset so you can sell them more product. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do, right?
Yes.
So, and what's interesting in social analytics for years, what we've done is we've kind of categorized it by building a query of some sort, some sort of complex Boolean query, which, doesn't really capture everything. And then you have metrics, you have engagement metrics, you have view metrics. I mean, just like you're doing in your business. The challenge is the most valuable data there is what people are saying. It's just like you and I having a conversation, right? Us processing that conversation back and forth, except for that's happening hundreds of thousands of times, right? It becomes very difficult to understand what we were supposed to be talking about. Well, the value is that I can process that for you, right? You can now read 20 summaries and understand what's going on about the entire conversation, the parts you want to dig into, highly accurate sentiment. And what we realized was we built a UI for this whole thing, but ultimately people just want to be handed the answer. I mean, they don't want to look for it and work for it. And so we've built a report that just says, all right, here's the 5-page research report on that audience, and here's what you want to know out of it. It just shortcuts their time for what would take them. I don't know, some customers it's 10 hours, some customers it's 25 hours, takes now 2, and they just get the answer.
Yeah, and I asked that question because the way I can think about utilizing, your tool, your company, is the more I can segment the list or segment the audience, the more personalized I can make
Absolutely.
offers. Personalized, I can make my outreach, my follow up, et cetera, et cetera. And I always there's this guy on YouTube. His name is Jeremy Haynes. The way he describes like selling to rich people is he always brings up the example of Louis Vuitton or like
Mhm.
Gucci or Chanel. If you
Yep.
spend a certain amount of money at Gucci, Louis, Chanel, whatever, you get a personal concierge, and you can essentially text his personal concierge. They will block out the entire store for you. You can go in there, shop with them one on one, and it's a very personalized, high touch feel. Now, I'm not saying we should do that, but what I'm saying is we should make the outreach or make that interaction personalized. And I think it's a great example to like compare this industry to what we're doing over here.
Yeah,
Who would
absolutely.
when you work with specific clients, for anyone listening, is there a certain amount of data that they should have? Or I imagine like small companies with very little data, probably not a good fit for them. So we just like medium-sized marketers, enterprise marketers, like who gets the best results working with you essentially?
Yeah, I mean, today what we work with is agencies, and they can be anywhere from indie agencies to global agencies. We work with some of the biggest in the world to some indie agencies here. We all live in Portland, Oregon, so some of those. But it's also enterprise brands, right? I think that every brand wants to understand their consumer better. What you find is the smaller the brand or the smaller the company, maybe the less they have the infrastructure to or the budget to spend on that type of insight. But as you get bigger, it just becomes more and more important. To your point about personalization, so many brands speak in a way that just seems impersonal, that just seems stiff. you know, Nobody wants to buy. This is why creators matter, right? This is why more and more brands are moving to creators, because that natural, authentic voice matters to the consumer. And so it doesn't matter. I mean, the smaller the data set, I will put it this way: the smaller the data set, the easier it is for the brand themselves just to understand it. You start to get into thousands, no person can read that, right? So that's where we fit.
For sure. Yeah, I think this would be like best fit for people that have sure like large data sets.
Yeah.
But on the topic of AI and humans, I think it is so vitally important to use AI to process the data, come up with key metrics, who's the audience, etc., and then use a human to make that outreach. Right? You can't use AI to segment the data and then use AI like use. How can I say this? People want that personalized touch, and the way we should approach that is a human to human interaction. Like, could AI help us with the outreach? Sure, but it should read like a human wrote it. And I bring this up because a lot of people, I think, are utilizing AI improperly, and you're utilizing it the best way imaginable, right? Speed, data, all that fun stuff. But when you're using AI to interact with humans and it's a huge AI tell, people are so like against that. Like it sits with me not well. I'm sure it doesn't sit with you, right? Like humans want to do business with other humans, not robots. You know what I mean?
Yeah, part of our vision for the future is what we call human AI. And that is really this ability for, if you think about you or I approaching any given situation, we approach that with our history of knowledge, of our experiences, of our cultural lens, of our biases, of whatever, right? And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. That's fine. But that's what makes things interesting, right? Is that multi-dimensional approach to things. Now, there are a lot of things in the enterprise that are done by humans that don't need to be. And those are the things that we need to figure out how AI can automate and do the tasks for. And that's because they were the only capable resource we had to achieve that task. The problem is humans don't scale, right? At least not really, right? I mean, you could throw a whole bunch of bodies at it, but you start to get a lot of bias in it. You start to get a lot of error in it and those different things. So what enterprises have to start doing, and this is really hard, is they have to start looking at their business and looking at workflows and saying, okay, what is the outcome I'm trying to get to? And how do I back up from that outcome if I don't have the baggage I have in place today to rethink that? So in our world with social analysts, for example, I have a whole team of social analysts that run social analytics for one of the biggest marketing departments in the world. And we talk about this all the time. They have too many things they're being asked to do. So we're trying to find ways to make them more efficient, but put the humans in the place where they can dive deep on high value things and where judgment and culture and taste reside, not where it's just a manual task that I'm going to sit in front of this computer for the next 2 days and have to do because I have to crunch through it. So it's about rethinking your organization to put humans in the loop where they can provide the maximum value and put AI in the loop where they can do tasks much more efficiently than a human can at scale.
Absolutely. I say this kind of frequently, and I'm definitely going to say it again. I don't think we should use AI to think for us. Like the individuals who work at that enterprise because they're smart, they're intelligent, they think, they have their own brain. And as soon as we use, they're up here from a thinking perspective, and AI is down here. As soon as we use AI to like think for us, then our ideas are now average. Because that's essentially what LLMs do, right? They take all the data in the world it goes to the medium, right? So it now becomes average. But if we can allow or just continue to think for ourselves and then use AI like help us like speed the task up, but on this level of thinking, that's when, like you said, that is the real unlock in these enterprise organizations or even at a solo entrepreneur scale. Right? It's still you doing the thinking, but having AI at least speed up that thinking for you, right? Speed up that task for you. That kind of makes sense.
Absolutely.
What else should the people know about working with your company?
Well, about working with us, I mean, the reality is that AI is challenging for a lot of people, and a lot of people say AI. I guess what I would say is that if you have any interest at all in understanding your consumer and your audience better, we can help you with that, right? And we do that anywhere from delivering your report to full outcome based, services where we do the whole thing for you. Um, the bigger picture I'd say for people with AI is so many people are trying to tackle AI today, and they're finding it advantageous in certain ways, and they're finding it challenging in so many others, from the cost perspective to how do I integrate this into my business and all these other things. I would just say that I would take a big step back, say, what am I trying to get out of this? How do I measure success? And really figure out those companies that are going to help you get there in your very focused tactical way, not in this general AI hype way. And if they're interested in that in marketing, we'd be happy to chat about that. So,
For sure. And I think just my perspective, right? What the fuck do I know? But from my perspective, I think because enterprise companies are using so many different softwares, and have all this data. Like, where do I even begin? How do I get all of these software tools to talk to each other, to connect, right? So I would say, how complex is that? I imagine it's complex as fuck, but like from your perspective, how does one even go about that?
Yeah, it's a big challenge. We're working with a company now on a pilot that we're doing where they have, I mean, this is a company that has billions of dollars a year in revenue, and they have tons of legacy systems like you're saying, right? They have an ERP system, they have a supply chain system, they have a bill of materials system, they have all these things. And these are old SaaS software implementations that have been there for a while and they've got contracts for a while. So that data is going to live there. And those processes are rough at times. And there's a lot of people in between those systems trying to make it all work. And there's a lot of manual processes. So we're approaching that by saying, look, you have a question. How do we go understand what's in your systems and pull the right information from them? And this is the difference where everybody thinks in LLM, you just feed it all the information and it'll figure it out. Well, that's not true. That's not how this works. It gets stupid and slow the more you do that.
Yes.
And so what we do is that we pull just the right context you need to answer the question that you have or the challenge that you have at the time, stitch that together, build that in a way that can give you an answer for that thing, and then go from there. But it's, to your point, it's complex. Like it's, how do you get information out of those systems? What access do you have? All those different things. So us all playing with a chat model, Anthropic or Claude or Gemini or whatever it may be, that's all fun for a consumer. At the enterprise level, it's hard. And they're scared to death that you're going to consume all their data. You're going to go train a model with it. Yeah, it's a big challenge. And is it correct, right? And are you making, if you don't have that human in the loop, are people making decisions on faulty answers, right? That's even worse. So,
Yeah, I was listening to this interview with Sam Ovens and Cole Gordon. Do you know any of those guys? No,
no.
it's okay. They're kind of big in the info space, like high ticket info product space.
Okay.
Anyways, Sam was saying basically what you said. If you rely on AI to make this decision for you, and this decision is wrong, and you are building processes on a wrong freaking like step one, like the entire infrastructure or your entire idea is now flawed. And you thought what like this is accurate, this is correct, and you're wrong. And it's so unfortunate. Like, how do you know? I guess you have to verify, but
Well, you have to have somebody that the models are wrong some, right? The models hallucinate or they give you the answer to the average. Okay. So that to start with. So everybody assuming that if I just trust the AI to figure it out is you just might as well stop there. This is why, I mean, so here's how we ended up where we ended up, right? We were asked to build a sentiment model for a major tech company. And so we went off and we said, okay, we've been doing analytics for a long time. We know sentiment is typically, and for people that don't know, sentiment is positive or negative or neutral, right? And so they wanted to know, are the comments on this platform, what's the sentiment of them? Now, sentiment is usually about 60% accurate. And we knew that if we delivered a model that's 60% accurate, like that's not interesting. That doesn't hold up to what we value, right? Which is accuracy.
right.
So this is where we discovered that context is critical to accuracy. And we've got research published on our site that talks about how we move from a 25% error rate to like a 1% error rate. So we built this sentiment model and we've had external major global agencies test this and it's 96% accurate. So you've got to start with garbage in, garbage out, right? Are you getting good answers to start with, to your point? And then you build from there. But if you're getting good answers, what you're finding is, I was just doing an investor deck, and what we're finding is that like Gartner was saying, I forget what it was, or maybe it was Forrester was saying, every week people are spending 4 or 5 hours a week just trying to validate if AI's answers are right. So are you really saving time by doing this if you don't know that the answers are right? Right. And can you trust it as a CEO? Can you trust that all these people in your organization aren't just depending on wrong answers? Because one, they're not looking under the hood. And two, to your point about cognitive decline, do they know the right answer? So you got to start with somebody you trust. And I hope we can be that company for people. So
When you say context, right? Just to simplify everything, maybe use the example that you're bringing up with that enterprise company. But when you say add context, my friend, what do you mean? Just to help the audience out.
well, the easy version is that, like I said, she's coming for blood. If I give you that post by itself and you feed that to Gemini, It tells you it's negative and it's aggressive because it doesn't know. Because to your point, is its averages, it's negative and aggressive. Now, context could be, is this Caitlin Clark coming at you down the court? Also, that's perspective. Are you a fan of the opposing team? Or are you a fan of the Indiana Fever? Right. That's also context. Is what perspective are you coming from? Every day, everything that you and I do, every decision that you make has context in it because you know what the context is, who you're talking to, how you got there, what the background is, all those different things. Those are things as humans we do every single day. What people are assuming today is because these AIs have a million token context windows, they talk about context a lot and they fill it up. The AI doesn't know which part of that it's supposed to focus on. So it's not only accuracy, but it's also consistency. So one time it'll say, well, I'm going to focus on this. I'll give you another example. We did some other music video stuff and it said, this goes crazy on mute. The AI didn't know what to do with it. So that's a negative backhanded comment for people that don't realize that, right? It's slang. It's this goes crazy, which is good as long as it's on mute, which I can't hear it, right? So the AI would take this goes crazy and be like, oh, this is positive. This is positive because it didn't focus on the as long as it's on mute part, right? So an AI has an intention mechanism which basically says, how do I make choices down this, system to decide what the average is, what the answer I'm going to give you is? If it doesn't have context, this is where it fails. I mean, context is so key to this whole thing that it has to sit in front of every AI decision there is, or it will be wrong a lot.
Which LLM do you use, or which one's your favorite? Let's dive into this.
Uh, well, we do a ton of work with Google, so I have to say Gemini. Gemini is fantastic, and what's interesting is that all these models are chasing each other constantly.
It's kind of fun.
Um, I use Claude more than anything. I think Claude Cowork and Fable 5 are fantastic. I think they just do an amazing job. Gemini's behind.
Sorry, can I ask? You brought up Fable 5, and it's freaking expensive
It is,
versus
yeah.
Opus 5. Do you find that Fable 5 is actually better than Opus 5?
I don't know that I've done enough testing to know. I use Fable 5 until my credits run out for Fable and then I go use something else.
Right, right.
Um, so I don't know that I've done enough testing to really know per se.
For
It
sure.
is expensive. And here's the thing. This is the other thing, just as a side topic, I guess, is that um, for most enterprises, you don't need the latest foundation model. The latest foundational model is neat for a lot of things, really complex things like Fable 5, you and I using it. We don't need it. I promise you, we don't need it. We could probably use Haiku, which is their lowest model, and get just as good a result. So we're finding for the things that we use AI for, and I think for enterprises, 95% of the things they use AI for, you could use an open source model like Llama, like Gemma, like Quinn out of Alibaba in China, like Kimi 3. Those open source self-hosted models, your cost structure goes down dramatically by using those. And for 95% of your tasks, they will do just fine.
Yep, yep, for sure.
So,
And that's like, you don't know what you don't know, you
yeah.
know? And like enterprise, because they're enterprise and they have all this money, they think, oh yeah, let's get the latest and greatest. But like to your point, you can save a bunch of money by not doing it. You can invest in, I don't know, literally anything else. And the other part is like you can probably get the result faster because I know with Fable and Opus, they take a longer time to think, right? So if you use the open source model, the cheaper version, and a lower, faster model, you just get the outcome faster, right?
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
let's see here, my friend. What's the background of you, man? Like, how did you even get into this world?
Well, I was an accountant and a CPA to start with.
No way. Okay.
Um, way back when. I went into a tech company and did a bunch of different things and landed in running a startup for them. In that startup, I discovered social. I discovered that all these people we were trying to meet lived on Twitter at the time. It's still
Mhm.
Twitter to me, not X.
Yep. Twitter all day.
Um, and we built, and these people were doing crazy things for us because we built relationships with them, and just because they became our friends. And it showed me the power of social. And so through all that, I met my co-founder of Tellagence because he was basically doing his PhD around how information moved across networks, dynamic networks like this. And so our first version of a product we built was the ability to predict word of mouth extremely accurately on social networks. And but this was back at the beginning of social, and nobody knew what to do with it. So it didn't make it. It's sitting in mothballs somewhere. Um, and so just along the way, Nitin, my co-founder, he's the brains of the operation for sure. As we tried to solve problems for, we've worked with, YouTube for a long, long time. And as we've done that and they've brought problems for us, Nitin just, had the ability to find different models, whether it be neural networks and LLMs to machine learning to all sorts of things. And so we've just continued to work and scrap and move forward as an entrepreneur would. And I don't know, that's how we ended up here. So
Thanks for the context. No pun intended. But
yeah, exactly. See,
you said you worked with YouTube for the longest time. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a pretty big logo. That's a pretty big flex, my man.
Yeah,
How in the world did you manage to work with fucking YouTube? That is so cool.
yeah. So I was on a panel at South by Southwest when I was talking about communities and network and social and why communities mattered. This was back in 2012, 13, maybe something like that. And my co-founder happened to be sitting next to a woman who he made a comment about her boots. And
Attaboy.
Nitin is not that guy. It is not who Nitin is. So he anyways, he made some small comment to her and she was sitting in the audience and she liked what I have to say had to say. And so we ended up talking afterwards, and that started a relationship that's lasted 13 years now of a lot of work with them. So
On the topic of like networking and making that comment on the boots, if you're ever this has worked so well for me, but if you are trying to network at the highest level and you don't know what to say to this person, hey, I like your boots, man. I like your shoes. Those shoes are so cool. It's like, oh, thanks. Like that is the easiest thing to say to somebody to start a conversation, and clearly it freaking worked. You guys landed YouTube.
yeah, it just serendipity. So it worked good.
Better, my man. Where can they find you if they wanted to explore more?
We're at Tellagence.ai. So you can find us there. You can find me, Matt Hixson, on any social, LinkedIn, X, Instagram, TikTok. Happy to chat.
Amazing, Matt. Thanks for joining us, my man. Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan.